during the pandemic, there's been a boom of delivery apps, and many Americans have grown accustomed to ordering takeout via many delivery apps, and DoorDash or Uber Eats might be one of their favorites. And with the rise of delivery apps, there's also ghost kitchens or virtual restaurants that in many ways could be serving you the exact same food of a name brand, but through an anonymous kitchen in some random location that you're none the wiser. So all that and more. And you're listening to the Investing Mastermind Podcast. I'm Michelle Markey.
And I'm Signe Lundholt.
And with this, there's kind of the good and the bad. In some ways, there's a lot of convenience with delivery, but there's also many cautionary tales that we should be a little bit mindful about. And with that, there's also a lot of shifts in the restaurant business world where a lot of restaurants are maybe meeting consumers where they want to be or reinforcing some of these delivery trends and also making more of their restaurants into drive-throughs instead of expecting consumers to dine in. So with all of these changes in the restaurant business, it could potentially open up certain interesting investing opportunities, or it's just something that, you're noticing as a consumer. So what do you think, Signe? Has the delivery boom been coming to Europe and Denmark as well?
Well, when you mentioned ghost kitchens, I was like a big question mark. I did not know about it and I hadn't heard about it, even though we frequently go to United States. I've been to the United States a couple of times already this year. Never heard about it. Never heard about virtual kitchens, ghost kitchens, cloud kitchens. It's got many names and I had to read up on it. And when I think about it, then yes, here in Denmark, I have come across some of these virtual kitchens. I would say it's more normal here when it's bigger catering jobs, like New Year's Eve, where I live, there's something called Dining 6 that comes very close to a cloud kitchen where you go and pick up your New Year's dinner, or it could be any other event. They actually do other events as well. But in Denmark, it's not that common. In Germany and especially in Southern Europe, like Italy, Spain, it's much more common. It's coming to France, where one of the co-founders of Uber also started a couple of companies in France to, deliver food through cloud kitchens. In the UK, it's become very popular. And as far as I can read, it actually started in Asia. Before the pandemic in China, they started these delivery services even before the pandemic. And then, of course, during the pandemic, it grew and it's very, very common. Singapore, Indonesia, China. So if we look to Asia and then are projecting that trend to United States and even to Europe, it does look like this is becoming very popular.
Right. And some of why I also became exposed to that was I was listening to a talk from Monish Pabrai where he mentioned that cloud kitchens are going to become more of a thing. So if this is an industry that some people understand, maybe they already know which of the players are having the first mover advantage and really gaining some of the market share. And like there could be potential investment opportunities if you understand this topic. And otherwise, if it's all kind of just a little mysterious, like kind of like how the name is in ghost kitchens, it's kind of hard to see. So it's kind of hard to imagine what's really going on. But imagine a ghost kitchen is an unmarked warehouse or the backspace of an existing restaurant that's only funneling food out through delivery services. And they can maybe reduce some of their overhead by doing that. So instead of having a brick and mortar footprint, like if you like going to Taco Bell, let's say, instead of doing that and, kind of enjoying the dining experience there, you could be getting maybe that same Taco Bell from some random building location that you would never go to because it's in an industrial complex, and you're getting that same, Locos Tacos in a delivery courier person, and you're paying maybe the same or more as if you had just gone there yourself, because a lot of people are spending way more on delivery apps. Like let's say you got a $10 burrito. If you go to the Taco Bell yourself, maybe you could just pay that, right? Because you're getting delivery, there are service fees, you tip, and there's actually sometimes some restaurants mark up their food in the delivery app menu because the apps want a cut of the restaurant's business. So you could be paying 50% more for that burrito or $15 now if you got it with delivery instead of just going over there yourself. And I know you might say, oh, but for the convenience and for saving my gas or my commuting costs and my time, those are valid points. So it's obviously a trade-off between your time and how much you're willing to spend on whatever's more important to you in this scenario. But yeah, there could be so many interesting directions that this could go. Do you think that ghost kitchens are just going to become bigger, or do you think people will eventually want to dine in more, or trends like that could reverse?
Well, I think that people will dine in more. I think under the pandemic, a lot of people, myself included, found sort of some joy in being at home, and that now going to a restaurant might be a bigger experience than just, of course, sometimes we go to a restaurant and it just needs to be a quick meal, but that it's probably more experience and event driven. When you go to a restaurant, you expect more from that experience versus, getting some takeout food from that maybe exact same restaurant. But when you actually go somewhere, you want that experience. I do know that for lunch restaurants, for example, it could be that people go, to eat lunch at a restaurant because they want to get out of the office. And that's a whole nother story. For me, I don't know a lot about the restaurant business. I would say it's outside of my circle of competence. What I can read about projections about takeout food and stuff, I do think there's a real disruption going on in the restaurant industry. And you've heard me talk about before, if there's disruption going on, then I would stay away from something like this because, it's going through disruption. And then in the end, we will see who are the winners in these virtual kitchens. We don't know yet. And, we will see a lot of competition at some point. And then some of these virtual restaurants will win the game and some won't. And right now, we won't know who the winner is. But one thing I think is interesting is if you look at a restaurant now, again, it's outside of my circle of competence, but if they have that leg of having virtual restaurant as well, then that might be interesting because then they kind of cover themselves in saying, okay, so we have the restaurant where you can dine in, but we also, look at the future, look at the projections, and we see, okay, this is coming. So that we can see that they know about the trends. What I really like about these cloud restaurants that you mentioned too was the low overhead, for example. So I would assume that they have higher profit margins than a restaurant with staff, and they need decor and signs and everything, and all of that costs, as a part of the overhead, as you mentioned earlier, Michelle. And so these virtual restaurants, there's something interesting in it because they are able to keep their costs low and potentially, have the same price or even higher prices on their food, as you also mentioned. So I think that's interesting to look into. And if I were to look into something like this, I would say to our listeners, look at the margins. When you look at these competitors within the virtual food chains, make sure to look at how well they keep their expenses low. Those are some of the things I thought about for these ghost kitchens. What about you, Michelle? Would it be something you would be looking more into as a potential investment?
Yeah, I mean, if this could be part of the future, and with the push of restaurants to consolidate effort somewhat. So, I'm sure, like any business, restaurant businesses are always trying to find ways to reduce their expenses while increasing profit. So with that, if you don't need to clean the cafe like in a Starbucks, you don't need the baristas to go running out there cleaning the cafe and the bathrooms and restocking stuff, and everything can just be an assembly line out of some location, and you just funnel it into the drive-through or into the to the delivery people. That could be a more efficient operation since you don't have to do as many tasks. And also with having this efficient operation, it could be good and bad. Like it could be kind of good for some efficiencies, but you lose that ambiance that some people actually enjoy being in a cafe, or they enjoy that dining experience and looking at the floral arrangements in a restaurant. And so you lose some of that, and you could be paying more because if you might have been used to getting your food at a certain rate by physically going to a restaurant, but now that you're doing it via delivery, you might not notice that they bumped up the burger by $1, or you're paying that much more in delivery fees. So things like that are somewhat of a concern as on the consumer point of view. But if you're an investor, you could be profiting from this trend of the more that Americans just keep doing this, and it's on the rise. Like apparently nowadays, the average American spends $1,566 on delivery services, and that's about 79% of Americans. So if you're among that, you can see how this amount of money that more Americans are spending on just the service itself, that's not even the food cost yet, which Americans spend about $3,000 on the food. So overall, people could be spending on average $4,500 over the course of a year on both delivery apps and the food from takeout. So if you think about that, as a consumer, if you're looking out for your budget, you might want to be a little bit more conscientious about that, because that might be something that you're not realizing you're doing. It's like another expense that you didn't realize was kind of adding up quickly. But if you're an investor, you could be wanting to take advantage of this consumer trend, like maybe Monish Pabrai could be doing. Who knows? Maybe he's investing in some ghost kitchens in India. Who knows?
Yeah, it's huge in India, apparently, with also American investors coming in. And from what I can read also on articles online is that a lot of, some of those big investors are jumping into these, virtual kitchens and have been doing that for a long time in order to actually jump on this trend. So like I read something about SoftBank, which is one of those huge investment companies out there that actually have invested in some of these groups. I wish we would have actually, maybe looked at it at some of these ghost kitchens last time we were in the US, but it's so rare that we as tourists there, either me personally or with the family, that we would use Uber Eats. I also think from what you said, from just a personal finance perspective, there's a lot here to look into. If it's more expensive to actually order the takeout food and pay so much extra money to get it delivered, it might be something to be aware of also when you do your budget and things like that. Is it something that you want to prioritize in your life? If it's super expensive, when I say prioritize, I mean, we all need to prioritize what we spend our money on. And for me, it's definitely travel. So for me, it's not a priority to buy food through these apps. What I've noticed is that the food is more expensive. There's usually a fee to get it delivered. And like you say, even here in Denmark, where we don't have a tipping culture, now the apps actually have, oh, do you want to tip? We have Just Eat, which was founded by a Dane. And I know it's a global thing right now. But when I look in that app, I can definitely see that the restaurant prices are more expensive than when I look at the restaurant's menu. So it's something that I don't prioritize personally, because I want to spend my money in another category. And it's something that you listeners out there need to think about. If you like to order through these apps, actually, be mindful of, am I now spending my money on something where if I stop doing this, I would, maybe save $1,500 a year and would be able to book that vacation. It's definitely food for thought.
Yeah, indeed. And yeah, that $1,500 could be a flight somewhere to an exotic destination that you've been wanting to go to. So yeah, and there's some sort of growing pains in this industry of, while you could be getting the convenience of getting the same burger or burrito that you enjoy from some of your popular favorite restaurants, there's also confusion. Like how on Uber Eats, they had to shut down a bunch of the virtual restaurants because there were so many listings coming from the same locations, some of which could be the actual restaurant or some of which is warehouse space that could be the virtual kitchen. And so they're now requiring the ghost kitchen and its parent restaurant to maintain a 4.3 star rating on the app, and also 5% or less of orders canceled and 5% or lower inaccurate orders. So they got to have better standards now so that people are not overwhelmed by all the choices. Because I think you were telling me about an example of where, you know, you're not sure kind of what you're getting, and your order, it could look like the same burger, but you don't know who's really making it. So that from a quality perspective, as a consumer, you know, how can you be sure you're getting what you're paying for?
Yeah, and that's actually also been some of the complaints. Mr. Beast, who is one of the big YouTubers, my kids love him, and I think he's doing a lot of great stuff from what I can see with philanthropical purposes. He has this restaurant, and now that's a big story in and of itself, but one of the complaints were that the food quality was really terrible and moldy burger buns, etc. So there's been actually some complaints about these cloud kitchens. I usually also actually get quite overwhelmed with these delivery apps with, you know, browsing through and what do I want. It's a bit overwhelming. So I think it's a good idea for Uber to also start, you know, making some criteria, because I watched a video with someone who was showing that an address near him had 44 of these virtual restaurants, or 44 different kinds of restaurants on the Uber app. And when he looked into some of the different items on the menu, he had like ordered a burger, and that burger was in 9 different restaurants. So he could order the exact same burger from 9 out of these 44 restaurants on that address, which just, you know, it makes people confused when it's like that. And I understand that, you know, when you want to order from a restaurant, it would be nice if you could order for the whole family from that restaurant, so they need variety at the same time. But, you know, for me, it gets too overwhelming. There's too many choices, and then I just give up, which, you know, I would assume that Uber is like, okay, yeah, if people give up because they get overwhelmed, that's not a good idea.
Yeah, and that's actually a concept called the paradox of choice. Like, in having too many choices, people don't want to order anymore, or don't want to choose. They're just undecided. So maybe they're seeing that in the app. People are exiting the app and being like, forget it. I'm just going to go to my local pizza place and just, you know, pick up something because it's just, I see the pizza, I want that one, easy. Like,
that's me.
You know.
Like I'm in that way, you know, it's so funny because I love different kinds of kitchens and food and world food and stuff like that. But sometimes I'm also like, okay, let's just take the thing I know, because I'm overwhelmed. So
yeah, I know. And like, we don't have time to be, you know, inundated with all these many menus from the same exact place. Like, who's got time for that? Like, to kind of sift through, it's like looking for a burger, like a needle in a haystack, like kind of like, why should it be like that? So there's the good and the bad, obviously. Like you mentioned before, you got to prioritize and decide what's important to you and what would you rather live with. But definitely keep this kind of subject in mind as a just both a consumer and an investor, because like we said, there's both aspects of this that are sort of helpful and some things that are sort of not so great yet, but there's tremendous potential of fundamental restaurant business change. So if that's important to you and you feel like you understand restaurant businesses, this could definitely be something to look into more of what's changing in the next 10, 20 years.
Absolutely. And I hope this was inspirational. Don't just jump on this trend because you heard us talk about it. What you hear us say is the restaurant business, study it, make it a part of your circle of competence. You need to understand about their margins and how they make money. And once you do that, maybe this would be something that would be interesting to look at. And maybe you would say, nope, this is going to cause disruption. And I can't pinpoint who is going to be the winner of all of these new companies that are now coming out with this concept. I'm getting hungry with all this talk about food. So we're coming to an end of the show. Do you have any final notes before we say goodbye for now?
Well, I just want to say thank you for sharing all your food for thought. So I thought that was pretty good that you threw that in there. So thanks. Let's get something to eat.
All right. We will be back on Tuesday.
Till next time.
If you enjoyed the show and found the content informational, we would be super grateful if you would leave us a review and follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you automatically get new episodes in your feed. We publish a new show every Tuesday.
The contents of the Investing Mastermind podcast are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. None of this is investing advice, and if you need help in your personal situation, please consult with a professional.